Welcome to another CEO/founder Wisdom Pod. We have Victor Pino with us today. He's a cannabis industry expert with 20 plus proven years of success. He is CEO at Cannabis Bar Services and has been in the industry for quite a while. So we're going to discuss about cannabis nowadays, cannabis stores and so forth. That is certainly a fun thing. Victor is in the SF Bay area, Oakland area. And this podcast has been brought to you by podbuyer.com. If you want to start scale, be invited to podcasts like this one, or even get sponsors. Podbuyer is my podcasting company, so we can help you do that. Victor, welcome to the pod. Can you tell me a bit more about yourself and your companies? Because you've got a couple here. And obviously, I didn't mention Emerald Farm Tools. If you can tell us a bit more about that one.
Totally. So I've spent the better part of my cannabis career doing kind of marketing based work. So I was trained under my undergrad was in marketing. English was my undergrad, but I did a lot of marketing work and worked on right after school, just got gigs in marketing, learned how to be a digital marketer, learned how to do that, and then moved into the cannabis space, not just as an activist early on when we were kind of trying to change the laws 20 plus years ago, but subsequently, I moved to California from the East Coast, from New Jersey, 13 years ago. And at that point, it was still in California, it was an industry. It was we were operating medical cannabis. But really, I jumped in, feet first into a dispensary marketing directorship with the Berkeley Patients Group, the nation's oldest standing dispensary here in the Bay Area. From there, I just kind of started learning what it was like to create marketing campaigns for what would be a very constricted, very limited industry when it comes to marketing, advertising, stuff like that. So very, very tight regulations and limitations around that. Think like, regulated pharmaceutical industry, alcohol, all those things, all those limitations and barriers kind of bundled up and made worse for the cannabis business, right? So learning how to navigate that, I helped found and kind of grow the early stages of the Cannabis Marketing Association based out of Colorado. And then when legalization took hold in California, I went and jumped into building Emerald Farm Tours, and 2 years ago, Cannabis Bar Services. So that was the trajectory that leads us to today. And Emerald Farm Tours started off as a tourism company, and for cannabis-centric tours and experiences, education for businesses, education for consumers and tourists. And Cannabis Bar Services grew out of it 2 years ago from a need to serve events with safe consumption access from a bar across the bar.
We've seen folks like Berner grow empires. So if we focus on very successful case studies in the industry, can you comment on why do you think Berners and Cookies are so successful?
That's a really interesting question. I think very honestly, they're well-capitalized organizations. They started off early with a product. They started off early with heavy marketing. There was never a shortage of money in those companies, right? Where I've seen success in my businesses is starting from zero and building to where we are today, right? Which is a completely different perspective and play than the investment backed, organizations such as Berners Cookies or that whole enterprise, which from day one upon, taking investment, we're just flush with capital and still are flush with capital. There's no loss to be had when you're that flush, right?
Cannabis tourism is probably a first for me, but it makes a whole lot of sense. Just like there's a bunch of wine tourism. Well, I believe, yes, there must be some people that are searching for the finest weed out there. So tell us about the business idea that you had, the why, and tell us how the business is doing right now.
So we've seen the business we had started has morphed into different things over the 6 or 7 years we've been doing this. realistically, this started off as a challenge from a reporter friend of mine, a journalist friend of mine. We were approaching the end of the year prior to legalization kind of becoming a thing, and he had asked me to use my Rolodex of industry contacts to bring him to write a story up in the Emerald Triangle. Well, on our journey back along the way from a farm, he basically said, look, we're going into legalization. There's a lot of interest in cannabis tourism. Is this something you consider kind of opening this Rolodex up to the world? Have you considered doing this for other people? And I said, challenge accepted. And that night, went home and registered emeraldfarmtours.com. A month and a half later, we ran our first tour on about middle of February 14th of that following year. 2 months later, I should say 2 months later, we ran our first tour, and it was an industry focused verticals tour, seed to sale tour. We started the business with $0, and we've seen in the past years 6-figure years that have done great, and then we've seen COVID where we've had to be shut down for absolutely just no business, taking support from the government basically to keep our business afloat. And then after that, we've seen now this growth pattern, this emergent growth pattern of a return to somewhat of a normalcy where, this year, at the end of this year, I can probably report a nice healthy gain against the last couple, 3-4 years shown on paper, right?
It seems that you always had multiple business ideas in the cannabis world, and it's quite impressive to see that you executed on most of them, and even survived COVID, because that was pretty hard. The second one that caught my attention, Cannabis Bar Services. So I have a client that I'm currently serving in the events business, and to me, I picture you bringing literally like a mini bar, and instead of alcohol, it's weed, and you can taste the different strands. So tell us about that business. Who do you target with that, and how many customers you can close a year, and what kind of customers are they?
Totally. So very honestly, it's been a very lucrative business in terms of understanding. First of all, the big challenge is understanding which markets you can operate in, right? Not every legal cannabis market is primed for this. We're currently in 4 states. We're currently operating actively with bookings in California, in Oregon, in Michigan, and now we're looking to book our first bar service in Missouri, which is an interesting kind of gray area state. Still, they're legal, but it's just still a very emergent market, and we're still learning our way around there. But in those other 3 markets, we've been booking very well and very tightly, executing on those events. Now, what does that look like? You said it right there. Is that we bring a bar, we bring a bar to the aesthetic of the event. Whether the event is a wedding, where the couple getting married is interested in cannabis, or they're in the industry, or they just want to offer something for their guests that don't drink, which is a very real thing these days. The other thing that we do beyond that very simple premise is create a healthy, safe access point, where folks who maybe have never consumed cannabis want to try it at this wedding, and we make sure that they enter that space very carefully with all the information they have at their disposal, with experienced bud tenders and people behind the bar, my staff, i.e., that are extending a conversation with these folks and understanding where their level of expertise and experience is with the plant, so that they're not just smoking, getting faced, and then making an example, a bad example of themselves on the dance floor at the reception, right? We make sure people don't overconsume. We keep the ashtrays clean. It's a full service experience, and we really elevate the level of what it would be to serve at a bar. But now we're serving cannabis. We're serving cannabis products. It could be a chocolate fountain. It could be, whatever it is. Everything is done very safely and with a process in mind.
And it seems pretty complicated to accompany someone that didn't smoke weed before for a couple of reasons. Well, the first one being that weed, like one puff and you can get pretty high depending on what strand it is, a few holds and so forth, and yeah, your bio chemistry and so forth. And the second thing is that you cannot I think, well, that's my opinion, you can educate someone as much as you want on how you will feel after you smoke, but they can only feel it and smoke it and get in the state after they smoked, and
The experience,
sometimes it's already too late once they're there. So how do you deal with these two factors? Like, is there some strands that are way lighter? Is there a way to smoke that is way calmer, like a joint obviously would be a way, or in French we call it an aiguille, like something that's really slim, just like a cigarette or something. And second, once the person has smoked, like how do your staff accompany them throughout the trip?
Well, very good questions. First of all, when we do start down the relationship process of and to your earlier question, we're now very successfully booking a few of these a week, right, in all of these markets. Like, this is turning into becoming more of a full-time job than Emerald Farm Tours has ever been for us in the reality and the grand scheme of it, right? Cannabis catering, there's a lot of potential behind it. But to answer your second question, once we start these bookings and we start to take these relationships and these conversations further into closer to the date of the event, we learn about the types of people that these that the couple are. We learn about their consumption habits, why they want to bring cannabis. It's really a relationship building process, even through the end of the event, because everybody you're there with, you want to make sure has a great time. So preventing them from getting to the point of walking through that proverbial door they can't walk back through very easily, right? Preventing that is part of the art of serving behind the bar, whether it's alcohol or it's cannabis. And my team are amazing. A lot of them with 20 plus years in the service industry and in the cannabis industry have done an incredible job of showcasing a model for our guests of safety, security, and confidence in how we serve them. So for example, if somebody comes to us and we know that we've served them several joints over the course of the evening, and now they're drinking, and now it starts to become a little dicey, we're definitely going to make sure that person gets a CBD joint exclusively and not furthers themselves into the realm of getting sick or whatever, getting sick on the dance floor, let's say, let's forbid that happen. So
yeah, because for listeners, THC is like the psychoactive, and yeah, from experience I can tell you that every time someone gets drunk and smokes a joint, it might end in vomit, and the head like spinning around and around.
The spins. Yes, we're all very familiar. That's why even when I do my cannabis tours, if we do a weed and wine tour, we'll typically smoke cannabis first and then finish with the wine, and then I'll send them on their way, because that's just simple insight there, right? Don't get someone drunk and then give them weed. It's a recipe for disaster. I usually end my tour on the 3 half pour wine tasting, and that's just to talk about terpenes and the olfactory hues of wine.
Yeah, and CBD dominance, another great strategy, because if you give them strong THC, I mean, if they're like daily users and they know what to expect, sure, but THC can get pretty strong, even more so with edibles. I've had some of my biggest trips while I was on THC, not even talking about LSD and all of these things, but just THC. It's pretty powerful, especially when it's concentrated. How much people should pay for that? I just had my wedding 2 weeks ago, and I would have liked to hire you. What's the price for that?
So we start in all four markets. We typically start at $2,500 plus the
That's huge.
cost of cannabis, right? Which is an affordable service, right? But that service supports about 100 people at that price, right? So your typical wedding being about 100 people to 150 people, that increases the price a little bit. Also, we have a whole menu of additional offerings that go along with that would add to that experience, whether it's a goodie bag for the guests with a pre-roll on the way or on the way out, or a custom pre-roll case, or just even we make custom signage for the bars so that it's a souvenir, of course, for the guests, for the couple to take home with them at the end of the service. It has their full menu laser cut into a beautiful, piece of wood, and we have that on display during the event. So a lot of events like this are coming up. We've also been asked to service corporate events in the Bay, tech events. We've been asked to service interesting stuff. Actually, we've supported film openings in Los Angeles. Like, so we're in the bottom of the theater at the outside of the theater in the back area, serving joints to all the guests. So stuff like that has been a remarkable experience to have as a business owner, right? To start your business very focused on the thing that has been your passion for so long, and to allow the business to take you to interesting places like that, I think is always what really makes me want to do this every day.
And you've served pretty rich and powerful people as well. What did you learn from hanging out with them and having them chill behind a joint?
Whatever, that's the common equalizer, right? The greatest equalizer for any human being or any two human beings in a room is to pass that joint, to level yourselves up with cannabis, right? I think that the people that I've had a lot of challenges in dealing with high dollar clients, high value events. But in the end, when you meet the client face to face and you hand them that pre-roll across the bar, they're as thankful as anybody else, and it's as genuine as anybody else. So it's the great equalizer in many ways, right?
What's next for you? What's your goals for the rest of this year?
Our goals for the rest of this year is to maintain Emerald Farm Tours growing in different directions, both with event production, tourism into different markets, and a lot of educational experiences on the B2C side of things. We've done an excellent job on the B2B side of educating newcomers into the industry, businesses that are in the cannabis space for the first time. We educate them to a very, very detailed specification that they demand of us, right? I'll take those tours personally and I'll run them through contacts that I've had for 15-20 years in this industry and really give them the value they need. So growing that now more towards a consumer facing audience, and also growing cannabis bars, or keeping up with the growth of Cannabis Bar Services into other regions and markets now across the United States, as we do have a majority of states already having some form of legal cannabis to some degree.
Love it. Where can people find out more about you, Victor?
More about me on LinkedIn specifically. I have my whole resume on there and the trajectory I've followed throughout my career. You can learn more about me at emeraldfarmtours.com. And then also check out cannabisbarservices.com for a little bit more about what the bar service and cannabis catering world is doing.